satisfied with the design and layout. I think that's part of what led to the suggestion then that to the approval in principle, so to speak, and that this, the developer should work a bit more with officers to work on that design. The report to date suggests that some work has been done, even if a meeting didn't take place face to face. But at least it seems like there's tried to be some dialogue. We've certainly been copied into quite a few correspondence both ways about that. So it seems like there was some type of engagement and some attempts to change the design to take on board some of the concerns raised by officers. And what I'm therefore a bit perplexed about is that it's come back to the same conclusion again, which we had previously. And to me, I thought that the committee had already made a decision. In fact, if I may, Chair, the decision that was made at that point in time was proposed by Councillor Jitola and seconded by Councillor Hipsey that the application be tentatively approved pending further discussions between officers and the developer to significantly improve the design and layout of the scheme to ensure that the requirement for replacement of trees is fully satisfied. A further report to be submitted to the future of the meeting of the committee. So to me, that discussion, that dialogue, whether public or email dialogue or face-to-face or lack of, has taken place, and we can see that the developer has tried to improve on this. I hear what Jonathan's just said, but I'm just really not sure how far you want this guy to go, the developer to go, until we then tick those boxes. So to me, Chair, I'm seriously concerned about the recommendation in the report this evening.
Thank you. Yeah, Chair, to put it into context, I don't understand what we're asking for here. I brought up last time, I live on Brandon Groves. I think this fits in perfectly with Brandon Groves, I really do. We have areas in Brandon Groves with small cul-de-sacs like this. I think some of our members actually live in one. You can Magnolia Close, Medlar Drive. They end with knee-high rail fences going out onto open fields. Something that you said here wasn't right, yet it's allowed in Brandon Groves. And now the developer's done something here. You're saying it's an abrupt ending. I'm just very confused as to what we did want from the developer here, or what you wanted from the developer, because I'm getting the impression that the planners are saying, in their opinion, it's not a good bill. But as a member of the committee, I think it is. I need to wonder why we're here.
If I can draw your attention to the people who've moved on radically, I remember the officer's words to describe the design layout last time. It was around the word monotonous, which was quite, I found that was a word I'd never heard before in this chamber to describe a design and layout, but I couldn't then bring myself to approve the scheme in the existing design and layout. And of course then we get them a chance, despite Greenbelt's reservations, to go back and come back with a significantly new design. I'm kind of torn because Councillor Johnson says, well actually it's in line with a lot of the Brandon Groves scheme, which is, you know, quite nice. But I think I don't think it's moved on enough to be described as significant. And I think there was another word, obviously the abrupt ending. Something just doesn't seem to be right with this scheme. I remain to be convinced that we should approve.
Okay, thank you.
Was for the developer to go away and demonstrate through a significant revision of the design the very special circumstances that would outweigh the material harm to the Greenbelt by building in this location. You know, process to one side, you know, looking at the application, it didn't do that for me the first time. I didn't think it could do it with any revision, and it hasn't. To be honest, nothing has really fundamentally changed to outweigh the material harm that's caused to the Greenbelt. We just talked about Greenbelt, we'll talk about Greenbelt forever and ever and ever in this committee. That's the key aspect of what we're talking about.
The last application we looked at was, this is more in keeping with the sort of thing I think we should be doing, and looking at this development, although it's Greenbelt, and I understand that, but at least it's in a position which is a little bit more, don't have so many objections from other people and the area. But the asking for a redesign density bit to be changed to give more greenery round the properties and design. If you change the density, then the developer may be in a position where he can't afford to do that because he's not going to make any money out of it. So I understand the fact that sometimes people can't go away and redesign and put together something that they're applying for. In that case, it should be accepted, because if that's the basis, you know, if they need to redesign it to a smaller number of properties and they can't make a profit, then it's a no-go as far as I'm concerned.
The first time around, I think the developer was asked to go and work with officers in terms of, I think design was part of it, but in fact then was number of dwellings. And then I think the developer, that was the September meeting. Then in the December meeting we had it where the number of dwellings had reduced, and the developer brought it back with the number of dwellings reduced. And then again, members are minded to accept the development, but were asked to go. The developer was asked to go and work again with officers, talk about the design layout. So this is now the third chance has come to members here, and I think it's back to the same thing. Yes, we've spoken about the in principle and maybe the location in terms of green belts, but we're also speaking more about the design now. And to me, that's the main thing is this thing about design and where we can get that balance right in terms of planning policy. A member to my left has said that this is in keeping with our dwellings around that area. I certainly think this is in keeping with houses around Chafford, where I represent. And I think the report itself actually says that the revised plans that are being considered have taken features from the dwellings of the Ardale site. So again, I can see that there's some work done. I think the emphasis is now on the meaning of significant design change, and I'm yet to be convinced, but I know Andy's about to come in to say something, so Chair.
Every time there's a draft, another bit of sticking price that goes on the fence. You're never going to see this green belt because it's behind a big high fence that's absolutely ugly. The building's falling down, and I think as planners we should think, what's ever going to happen to it if we don't make a decision? We can know about it all night long. No one wants to build in a green belt, but this is a little, you know, fenced off bit. You can only see it if you fly over it. I've said it before. It's absolutely turning into a tip. And it's in fact, you drive past, it's exactly fenced, that's what you see. So when you talk, we've just been talking about green belt, that's serious green belt, this is not.
It was back in September. It went from 14 down to 11. There's no mention of this site being now of the development. Mustn't forget this, as Councillor Curtis just said, is previously developed land, and as I mentioned at the last committee meeting, I actually looked at it on Google Earth, and when you get close up of it, you can actually see the inside of a ramshackle shell, basically, that is more than half enclosed by, on the northern boundary, a housing estate, on the eastern boundary, a load of tatty old garages, partly on the southern side of it, you've got all sorts of industrial vans and garages all around it, and I just failed to see that when it's mentioned that it's green belt, it's having detrimental effect on the green belt, I failed to see that. It's what's there now, and it's got to be far worse than what we have with some housing there. And I also said at the last meeting that I'm a bit of an advocate for looking after families that are currently living in private rented accommodation where people can hardly afford the rents, where they're actually living with their families and that. And when I was little, when a lot of people in this chamber were little, they had one thing to play in, back gardens, got a bit of space and that. What we're giving people now is flats and masonettes and that, and I hate it when we keep getting these put before us. And you know, Mollands saying that you have got a little bit of room, you've got a bit of space, and I think we should be giving families a chance of moving into, you know, some affordable accommodation, which is which is mentioned within this report, these houses, and give them housing to live in instead of these pokey little holes that so many developers come forward with us now, the flats and money slips. So, you know, so I still support this report that we did a few months ago. And we've heard from the officer now that the 106 agreement has been done. And if we're looking for reasons, of course, for special circumstances, well, we have got housing supply shortage at the moment, material reason. And, you know, there is a number of percentage of affordable housing within this area. So, with the previously developed land, which is another material reason, I'd like to put that, you know, those proposals forward to accept this small development. Johnny else got anything to say?
We had this debate in December, and we'll have it again now. The point is about the increased floor space of the development, you know, previously developed or otherwise. And I fully understand what Councillor Curtis said. I fully understand what you're saying and the rationale behind what you're saying. I think it's very dangerous. We've just had a very large application in which we considered that housing supply didn't constitute a very special circumstance on its own for doing that. I also think it's a somewhat dangerous precedent to say we'll give tentative approval to something on the basis of the developer going away and doing a significant redesign that answers the concerns, then turning back up here a couple of months later, having, you know, changed a few gutters and messed around with a few bits on the edges, and saying, well, that's fine in terms of the ability of this committee to make those kind of representation of developers about high quality design. The committee we debate this, and everyone's got an opinion, and nobody's, I don't think anyone, I'm not going to say I think anyone's wrong because I think I'm right, but I think everyone has a valid viewpoint, but I'd just like to make those two concerns clear at this stage.
And you're absolutely right, yes.
I do live here. Even the Residents Association that we were concerned in the beginning, even then they said since it has changed, let's say this site, they can see that it needs to be developed. I think their ideal was to have the house redeveloped, which would be mine as well. I think 3 to 4 properties was something they said that they'd consider as being acceptable too. Yeah, mine too. But we've got to look at the practicalities of this. As I said, I do live here. We've just spoken about a greenbelt issue that was totally different to this, and I mean totally. That was real greenbelt. This is not. Okay? This is an infill site that has already been built on. I stay with what I said the last time. I think this is a compromise, but I think it's a compromise that we have to take, because this site is just going to get worse and worse if we don't make a decision. And I think that decision needs to be made tonight. I actually think, rather than saying the harm that it's caused to the greenbelt, I think if we don't do anything, it's going to cause harm to the actual area. I really do.
It's not real greenbelt because it fundamentally damages our ability to depend on the legal definition of what the greenbelt is, which it has been for 60 years. I take the point, one's a massive open field and one's a slightly tatty site on the edge of a village, but the law doesn't allow for grades of it. It's worth remembering that.
Okay. Councillor Johnson.
I agree with what you're saying there, Councillor Spade. Greenbelt is greenbelt, but there are differences, and there are significant differences. If we are not to be allowed to even consider putting things on the greenbelt, then why are we here as a committee? Why does it just not go straight through everyone else and bypass us completely? We're here to debate it, we're here to discuss it, and I think the reason I said that there are differences in these two greenbelts is because there is. You can see that. The hundreds of people that turned up to see it can see that difference. This is not a greenbelt site, in my opinion.
Reasons which collectively the committee consider outweigh the greenbelt objection, and they relate to the contribution towards housing supply, the type of accommodation, big and family needs, the percentage of affordable housing, the design, members are satisfied as acceptable, and the fact that it is tidying up a site which is previously developed land and has caused harm to the amenities of the area. I believe I've captured what members' thoughts are Individually, Chair, I have to say that those would not be sufficient enough, but what you're saying is that collectively these reasons amount to very special circumstances, if I've read the committee's debate correctly.
Happy with that? Yeah? Okay, well I'll propose it. Anyone want to second it? Councillor Curtis? Or to Councillor Taylor? Yeah, okay, Councillor Taylor. So then can we have a show in favour then for that? Motion, yeah? Show it again. And those against? Okay, yeah? Alright. So then reference number 13/00986/FUL Bensons Farm, Mollands Lane, South Rockingham has been approved.